What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Florida Man Makes Headlines for Positive Reasons. As always, I am your host, Zach Cronin, and today we are talking about the hottest team in the NBA, which is not the Boston Celtics, it is not the Denver Nuggets, it is not the Philadelphia 76ers. No, it is the Orlando Magic. Side note, the Phoenix Suns are technically also the hottest team in the NBA, but I feel that the Suns' success was definitely expected considering the level that Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are playing at right now. Whereas the Magic success is a lot more is a lot more shocking. At the time of this recording, the Orlando Magic, as I just mentioned, have won 7 straight games and are currently second in the Eastern Conference with a 12-5 record. They are, as of right now, and according to the standings, better than Milwaukee, better than Philly, better than Miami, better than Indy, New York, Cleveland, all of these teams that have more talent, at least on paper, than they are. And yet they've been able to not only win more games than all of these teams, but they have actually beaten a handful of quality opponents. They just beat the Hornets on Sunday night, but before that, they had back-to-back victories against the Celtics and the Nuggets. They have also beaten the Pacers. They've beaten Chicago twice. They almost beat the Hawks. They beat the Bucks by 15. I want to say 112 to 97. I hope that math checks out because if it doesn't, I'm gonna look really, really fucking stupid. Growing up, and I'm gonna date myself here for all of you youngins that are watching. If you're old like me, you remember the days when the Magic were arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference, like Dwight Howard, Hidu, Turkoglu, getting to the finals, beating LeBron James in the postseason. I don't quite know if we are at that point right now, but the Magic have a very solid core and can continue to build on this success because this success, the success that they're experiencing, does not seem like a fluke to me. For the season as a whole, they are not that great of an offense. They're a little bit below average, but they have seemingly found some sort of rhythm over these last 7 games. What has been super impressive to me is their dominance on defense. At the time of this recording, during their winning streak, they have a defensive rating of 105.5, which is the fourth best in the NBA over that span. And for the year as a whole, they have a defensive rating of 107 flat. Both of those are courtesy of the NBA's website. I know the NBA and Basketball Reference have different ways of measuring the offensive and defensive efficiency, but they're close enough. So whatever. As it stands right now, the Magic are arguably the best defense in the NBA. And it's very odd because when you look at this roster, you see Paolo Banchero, you see Cole Anthony, you see Franz Wagner, you see Mo Wagner. There is nobody on this unit, especially now that Wendell Carter isn't healthy. There's nobody on this team that is a defensive stopper until we get to Jonathan Isaac. I think that Jonathan Isaac is almost single-handedly taken the Magic and turned them into an elite defensive unit. I know that, individual defensive ratings are a very skeptical stat to use. I much rather prefer to use on-off ratings. The on-off difference with Jonathan Isaac is 15.5 points per 100 possessions. When he is on the court, Orlando's defensive rating is 94.1. When he is off the court, it is 109.9. That is a astronomical difference. Even for a guy like Draymond Green, like Rudy Gobert, like Giannis Antetokounmpo, all of these like defensive player of the year caliber guys, that is a humongous shift. A lot of it comes down to Isaac's size. He's like 6'9", 6'10", with a massive wingspan, great athleticism, can guard guys like Jason Tatum and LeBron James. He actually put both Jason Tatum and LeBron James in prison when they matched up against him. Combined, they were 4 of 12, I want to say. I think LeBron was 3 of 8. Tatum was 1 of 4. I watched all of Boston's offensive possessions or all of their field goal attempts in their game against the Orlando Magic. Isaac has legitimate clamps. He looks like someone who could be the primary defender on a championship caliber team. I don't know if this is that championship caliber team, but he looks fantastic. I will touch on their offense a little bit, but I don't really believe that their offense is as responsible for their success as their defense because I'm looking at the box score right now and you guys can take a peek with me. Paolo Banchero is playing great basketball. Franz Wagner is remarkable as well. I think that Paolo has matured considerably since being a member of USA basketball. He just looks so much more comfortable on the court, much improved efficiency as well. There is a 6 percentage point difference in his overall field goal percentage, much improved from the 3-point line as well. Is still very much focused on getting downhill and attacking the basket, but overall Paolo is looking like a legitimate franchise cornerstone, as is Franz Wagner. I didn't know that him and Mo Wagner were actually brothers. I thought that it was just, like them both being German with the last name, but regardless, this duo is one that Orlando can lean on. They're so good at just so many different things, playing inside the arc, facilitating, and also keep in mind that they're doing this without really like a legitimate point guard. I think that's also why their offense is a little bit lackluster considering the pieces that they have, because Paolo is leading the team in assists. You have Markelle Fultz, who has only played in 5 games this season. Cole Anthony is another one of their more prominent ball handlers. These guys are not the facilitators that like LaMelo Ball is or that Tyrese Halliburton is. Granted, those guys are like way off in another stratosphere, but it gets the job done. And this team is winning games in spite of their offense, and it's largely because of their efforts on defense. I had already talked about Jonathan Isaac. I think that Goga Bitadze is a fantastic interior defender as well. Not a premier shot blocker by any means, but is enough of a deterrent to have a meaningful impact. He's averaging like 1.5 blocks per game. I've seen him play in the pick and roll, very active hands. He always plays big, and I'm talking about like his arms are constantly extended, trying to apply pressure on the defense. Him and Isaac really allow everybody else to play a much more energetic style of defense. I say this consistently, and I really do sound like a broken record, but like 80% of playing defense in the NBA, probably even 90%, 95% of playing defense in the NBA is effort. If you're a guy like Paolo Banchero, or you're a guy like Markelle Fultz, and you have all the physical traits and the athleticism, you can be a serviceable defender. Maybe not to the levels of Jonathan Isaac, but enough to a point where teams cannot go at you and target you offensively. When I watch this team play defense, I see a team that wants to compete on defense in spite of the fact that a bunch of these guys are not solid defenders at all. And I think some of this, or actually a lot of it, is the coaching philosophy of Jamal Mosley. I talked about this in my Houston Rockets video, but when you have a coach who prioritizes a game plan that is dependent on effort, at least on defense, you are giving your guys a lot of confidence because you are not asking them to play out of their comfort zone. I am not going to this team full of young players and having them play like sophisticated defensive coverages where they're disguising coverages, this, that, whatever. No, I am having a man defense, a zone defense. They play a decent amount of 2-3. I even saw a 1-2-2 against Boston. They have enough coverages to keep it dynamic, but there isn't anything extraordinary that this team does on defense. They literally just play hard, and it's really like annoying to talk about because there are minimal ways to quantify it, but I will give you a couple of stats that I think allow them to play such a fantastic style of defense. One thing I've noticed is that this team is very good on the defensive glass, and they crash the defensive boards at the expense of getting out in transition. As at the time of this recording, they're averaging 12.8 fast break points per game, which is like bottom third in the NBA, 21, 22, somewhere around there. However, their they have the 4th highest defensive rebounding percentage in the league. Gang rebounding, boxing out, securing possessions, and more importantly, finishing possessions. That is a trademark of any elite defensive unit. And again, this is a team that does not have an elite rebounder. Their biggest guys are Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner outside of Goga Bitadze. But Goga Bitadze is like the only legitimate center on this team. I mean, you could count Mo Wagner as well, but regardless, I'm getting distracted here. This is not a big team. This is not a team that should dominate on the boards, and yet they do, because they understand that you cannot have a solid rebounding unit if 4 of your guys are leaking out. Like, even watching a bunch of their possessions, there are 3, 4 guys in the paint at all times contesting these rebounds. The NBA hustle stats are very interesting to me because, like, it is finally quantifiable when you talk about a team doing the little things. 16.7 deflections per game for this young team. So they play aggressive sparingly. However, when they do gamble, they gamble properly. I don't know how, Jamal Mosley is teaching this. A lot of that comes down to the player's instincts, but I guess, if you watch enough film and you explain to your team how to play the passing lanes and how to contest inside the paint. I mean, honestly, whenever there are a lot of steals, it's not necessarily gambling. It's just knowing and anticipating and, again, like, playing big, using your length to your advantage. This is a super fascinating stat. Orlando is recovering 59% of loose balls on defense. When coaches talk about wanting it more, that is what they mean. And I know that wanting it more is it's a meathead thing to say, because especially when you get to the professional ranks and people are playing for their livelihoods and they're playing for a championship, to be dismissive of someone's effort, I feel, is very, very rude. That I think that being dismissive of a player's effort when they aren't showing it, it's just rude and it's disrespectful to the athlete. I mean, there are instances when guys just, stand around and look at the loose balls. Not a basketball example, but this past weekend when the Steelers were playing the Browns, there was a fumble recovered by Cleveland, and Deontay Johnson was just hanging out. He was literally posted there, like, "Mom, I threw up." And that's not winning any. That's not winning you any games in any sport. I don't care. But the Magic, like, at least according to this statistic, want it more than everybody else. Like, they're coming out on top with these scrums, especially on defense. Another way of ending the possessions. And this is a team that gets a lot of possessions. They run a lot. 100 possessions per game is their pace. They're the 9th fastest team in the league. They are getting out. They're running. They're playing in transition. They're having fun. They're using their youth and their athleticism to their advantage. And knowing all of that, it's even more remarkable that this is the 2nd or 3rd most efficient defense in the NBA. Like, I would need someone who is much more intelligent than me to sit me down and, explain to me, like I'm 5, how how this defense that isn't, again, on paper, should not be this good. And even when I watched the film, there were a couple plays where I'm like, how did they miss this coverage? Like, this was a play that I watched that looked to me like it was a blown coverage. I don't know if, there is maybe some, like, coverage disguise that I didn't know about. Maybe they're playing some sort of zone. I mean, it could potentially be a zone, but regardless, you have Al Horford coming up to set a screen on Jason Tatum, who is being guarded by Jonathan Isaac. There is a switch. Like, what the fuck happened here? So there is a switch from, not from one of the Wagner brothers to, I believe this is Jalen Suggs. And then the craziest part about this play is Al Horford just gets left open. Now, granted, there is a lot of congestion here, largely because of the poor spacing by Sam Hauser. But I watched this play and I was like, is this a broken coverage, or is this some 300 IQ defensive scheme that I have never seen before? Because Jonathan Isaac is straight chilling, which, leads me to believe that potentially this is some sort of 2-3 zone variation. And I mean, it's also not necessarily uncommon to have players switch their position in the zone depending on the set that the offense is running. So it's either a miscommunication on defense that they quickly rebounded from, or it was a very well designed defensive scheme. And either way, listen, it was a missed shot. There was good contest. There was good fighting over the screen. But this is a young team who is still, like, figuring out how to play defense for the most part. Like, that struck out to me. I was like, I don't know if that was done by design. But then I was continuing to watch, and there was Jaylen Brown taking a shot at the end of the 3rd quarter that more or less summarized to me everything that this defense is all about. When I was talking about effort, when I was talking about, wanting, quote unquote, wanting it more than your opponent. This is what I was referring to. So we have the end of the third quarter coming in. Jason Tatum's going to pass to Jaylen Brown. This is Mo Wagner on the perimeter guarding Jaylen Brown, who, although he can't go left and although he shot like 6 of 38 in this game, I think it was actually 6 of 22, but whatever. Jaylen Brown is still a very talented offensive player. Guy averaged like 26.5 points last year, is a all-NBA caliber guy. Look at how Wagner is playing. Hands high, hips squared. Look at this recovery. I mean, you're asking a 6'11 center to do a lot here, to stick with a very, very good wing player. And, he gets beat initially. Brown hits him with a decent step back, but the recovery, the effort, the understanding that at that point it is a 77-74 game heading into the fourth quarter. Like, that is something, sometimes you just simply cannot teach anything like that. And, it's plays like that that illustrate to me that this team wants to play defense and they want to form a defensive identity, which is huge because any elite team, when they are an elite team, they have an identity. You know how they are going to play. You understand the theory of how they're going to play, and it's up to you as the opposing coach to figure out how to stop them. When you look at the Warriors dynasty, all of the pace and space, all of the motion, all of the off screens and the back cuts, regardless of whether it was Steph and Clay or Steph and KD, you knew how they were going to play. Same thing with LeBron's Cavs. You knew it was going to be a steady diet of pick and roll, and it was up to you to prioritize whether you wanted to allow LeBron to beat you or if you wanted everybody else to beat you. The Magic are, going into games being like, we're going to stop the most dynamic offenses in the NBA. And to their credit, they've done it, man. I mean, this is not a fluke. This is a legitimately good defense. And shout out to Jamal Mosley. Shout out to Cole Anthony. Shout out to Jonathan Isaac. Shout out to all of the other guys on this team who do not have the reputations of being, serviceable defensive players, and then basically showing all of the doubters that they can and they will play a high octane, an energetic, and a disciplined style of defense. Mostly disciplined because, as I mentioned, this is a young team. There are instances when certain coverages get blown, where they forget a switch, where they leave somebody open. They started off, I think, their most recent game against the Bulls with not necessarily a botched possession, but it effectively led to Kobe White making a three to start off the game. Relatively open three at that point, but that's going to happen. I think that it speaks to Mosley as not necessarily a coach, but as more of like a leader as to how he can show these kids their mistakes the following day, and none of them have their confidence impacted by it. It shows that he is really a talented teacher and someone who, not only has respect for his team, but has commanded the respect from his team. He's been with this team for 2 years. He's familiar with some of these players. He's familiar with the organization. And, stuff like that is also showing. So, shout out to him. Really shout out to everybody. I don't know, I don't know what this season looks like for the Magic. I don't think that they will be a contender for another couple of years. But who's to say that they don't go to the playoffs? I think it's more likely that they finish as like a 6th or a 7th seed. But who's to say they don't go to the playoffs and beat one of these, elite teams in the first round, because they've done it already. They beat Boston. They beat Milwaukee. They beat Indiana, as I already mentioned in the at the beginning of the video. So who's to say they don't make a surprise run later on? I think I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. As always, thank you guys so much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this. Shout out to all of the new subscribers. By the way, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. And with that, I'll catch you on the next one.